Good morning, everybody. We've got a full room in here today. Nice to see. We are back to our conversation in relation to artificial intelligence. We've had a really useful set of meetings over the course of the past month or so, helping to inform us from a variety of different perspectives as to where things are at, where they're going, and where we want them to be. So very much appreciate witnesses being here today to help us in the continuation of that. Just a reminder to witnesses that are in the room, if you are using your earpiece and it's plugged in but not on your ear, just make sure, please, it's placed on the sticker in front of you. That's to protect the health and well-being of our interpreters. If you're not using it, it's not plugged in, of course, that's not relevant. If you have questions about how to use the interpretation devices, just let us know. OK, alors, on a plusieurs témoins avec nous.
So we have several witnesses with us this morning. Welcome to Mr. Garon by video conference.
Today, Professor Barry Sanders, welcome, Professor. From the Canadian Telecommunications Workers Alliance, Nathalie Blais, the research representative from the Canadian Union of Public Employees. We have Roch Leblanc, the telecommunications director for Unifor, and Corey Mandrick, lead organizer, United Steelworkers, National Local 1944. And from Q Data Centers Limited, James Beer, the chief executive officer. Witnesses, you will each have upwards of 5 minutes for your introductory remarks, save for the Canadian Telecommunication Workers Alliance. I believe it's Monsieur Leblanc qui prend la parole pour vous.
I believe it's Mr. Leblanc who will be speaking for you.
Alors, jusqu'à 5 minutes pour votre...
So you have up to 5 minutes for your opening comments, please.
Good morning. I'm Roch Leblanc from Unifor, and I'm joined today by Corey Mandrick with the United Steelworkers and Nathalie Blais from the Canadian Union of Public Employees. Together, our organizations form the Canadian Telecommunication Workers Alliance, an alliance of 3 of the largest unions in Canada, representing over 32,000 workers in the telecom sector, including those at the Big Three, Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. We look forward to sharing our views with you today. Through our collective expertise in connecting Canadians and our experience in artificial intelligence within the telco context, we are well positioned to contribute to this study in order to help protect Canadian privacy and digital sovereignty and to mitigate potential harmful impacts of AI on telco workers and customers. Telecommunications is a strategic industry that underpins almost all other economic sectors and many aspects of our lives. In this context, Canada must be able to assert its autonomy over the telecommunication and digital infrastructure to guarantee the digital sovereignty of our country. The federal government must not compromise Canadian national security and privacy rights by allowing foreign influence or operational control over any part of our telecommunication networks. This involves regulating the widespread use of AI in the industry. Canada has little control over data once it leaves the country, meaning that foreign-owned AI tools and data centers outside of Canada that support AI tools pose a risk to our personal information. Au cours de la dernière année, plusieurs fuites de données importantes ont...
In the past year, we've already seen major data breaches at TELUS, Digital, Rogers, Fido, and Freedom Mobile. Canada's telecom network is an information-rich target for cybercrime, and keeping personal information onshore is essential to protecting it. Canada must start thinking about repatriating call center and other critical telecom work offshored. As the industry further incorporates AI, an unregulated use of AI leaves all Canadians and Canadian companies using telecom networks vulnerable. Regulatory measures around AI, whether broad or industry-specific, must be in place to protect customers and workers. Telco workers face many challenges with AI, the first one being workplace surveillance fueled by AI. For example, many of our members have every word of every customer call screened by an AI system. This system can grade, among other metrics, the agent's percentage of calls that successfully bridge into a sales conversation. Technicians also see their time working on a repair assessed by an AI system. In both cases, surveillance is constant and oppressive while pushing workers to meet unrealistic expectations. The use of surveillance AI systems should be limited as they lead to more psychological distress and work intensification, to workplace health risks and safety risks. Federal legislation must also better protect workers by strengthening labor rights to address algorithmic management, technological change, and training.
We're aware of at least one Big Three telco using AI to mask the accents of offshore agents, altering how customers perceive who they are talking to. Our members have had overseas agents demonstrate the technology on agent-to-agent calls. The use of AI technology to deceive Canadians in any way should be prohibited. The expanding use of AI chatbots may seem to provide a cheap alternative to Canadian labor, but these systems don't always fulfill their promises. AI is a tool that may enhance a worker's productivity, but should not be used at the expense of workers and customers. Canadians should know when AI is being used and have the right to talk to a human based in Canada, regulated by Canadian standards. Automation and offshoring of work have led to the loss of more than 20,000 telecom jobs in the past 10 to 15 years. And AI is now intensifying the trend steadily with exit package offering every year. The federal government must establish a national AI framework that protects the privacy, data, and rights of customers and workers, as well as good Canadian jobs. We cannot rely only on the voice of the industry to guide the deployment of and governance of AI. A comprehensive social dialogue and consensus is required. The CTWA calls on the government to establish a permanent tripartite worker group on AI, including employers, labor, and civil society representatives, to work with the government to that end. Thank you for your interest. We look forward to your questions.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you, Monsieur Leblanc. Mr. Beer, I'll now...
Thank you.
5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning. I'm James Beer, CEO of Q Data Centers. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to contribute to your timely study on the opportunities, risks, and regulation of AI in Canada's strategic industries. To begin with, let me introduce Q Data Centers. Q Data Centers is a Canadian incorporated entity headquartered in Canada, backed by Canadian and international investors and managed by Infrared Capital Partners, a Sun Life company. Our corporate structure is anchored in Canadian jurisdiction, and I'm proud to say that we have one of the only fully Canadian management teams in the industry. Every facility is operated here on Canadian soil and by Canadian hands. We are sovereign by design and serve clients from across strategic sectors, including financial institutions, energy companies, healthcare providers, and government agencies. Our 9 facilities are strategically located across Ontario and Alberta, with proven infrastructure and available capacity. We are poised to invest and drive growth domestically, ready to scale our operations, deploy new workloads, and support long-term growth. We firmly believe that collaboration between government and industry is vital to building Canada's next generation of AI and data infrastructure. Q is here to power Canadian innovation into the future. We are well positioned to contribute to a cohesive, sovereign, nation-building strategy for AI infrastructure. Q shares the vision of the federal government for its next AI strategy: to accelerate the development of nation-building AI and data infrastructure, drive economy-wide adoption, and help build the strongest economy in the G7. To help achieve this vision, Q is pleased to provide the following input and recommendations for consideration by the committee as part of its study. Firstly, and very importantly, safe AI systems begin with the data centers powering those AI services. And like all strategic sectors, prioritizing domestic capacity will be key. How the federal government's defines sovereign AI is one of the most crucial elements of the forthcoming strategy and legislative framework. Q Data Centers recommends that the federal government define sovereign AI to mean that the corporation entity has the following attributes: data centers on Canadian soil, Canadian employees, a fully Canadian management team, utilizing Canadian networks, adhering to cybersecurity practices that protect their data, prioritizing Canadian partners for delivery of services, and finally, recognizing and acknowledging Canadian values in assessing industry participants. Q's position is that AI data centers are emerging as strategic and critical domestic infrastructure that already is or will be crucial to all operations of all sectors and services. The current global geopolitical context has heightened awareness about the importance of domestic capacity across core sectors. In its forthcoming strategy, Q strongly encourages the federal government to prioritize the Canadian sector, aligning with this definition of sovereign AI over foreign-controlled or located entities. A critical component of Canada's next AI strategy must be enabling building and scaling our domestic sovereign AI data center capacity and infrastructure. To this end, Q recommends two key components as part of the next strategy and legislative framework. The first being that strategic sectors such as banking, energy, healthcare, and defense be required to utilize sovereign data center infrastructure and services. The second being delivering new funding and tax incentives that are specifically designed to attract investment that will scale Canada's domestic sovereign AI infrastructure. Finally, strengthening the federal government's leadership through the renewal of Canada's AI strategy will be a crucial step in scaling Canadian champions and attracting new investment. In closing, these recommendations support aligning the sector with the federal government's priorities on digital sovereignty, security, and economic growth. Q Data Centres appreciates the opportunity to contribute to the committee's important and timely study on AI and would be pleased to respond to any questions to support this work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Beer. Mr. Sanders, floor is yours for upwards of 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Chair and honourable members of the committee, thanks for the invitation to appear before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. My name is Barry Sanders. I'm a professor at the University of Calgary, specializing in quantum science and technology, including the pillars of sensing, communication, and computing. I'm also Scientific Director of Quantum City at the University of Calgary and a Senior Fellow of the Centre for International Governance and Innovation in Waterloo, where I focus on analysis and policy for emerging dual-use technologies, with quantum and AI being important examples. I'd like to make 3 points about the relationship between AI and quantum technologies and why that relationship matters for public policy. First, AI for quantum. AI is helping advance quantum technologies. Quantum computing faces engineering challenges, especially noise, instability, and scaling up the size. AI can help design better devices, improve system control, and reduce errors. In quantum sensing, AI helps extract weak signals from noisy data. In quantum communication, AI can support network management and anomaly detection. In short, AI is becoming an enabling tool that can make quantum technologies more practical, more scalable, and more useful. Second, quantum for AI. Quantum computing could eventually offer new ways to perform certain computations relevant to AI, including optimization and sampling. These possibilities remain experimental today, and timelines are uncertain. That means policy should be balanced. Canada should monitor developments closely, invest in research capacity, and prepare strategically while avoiding exaggerated claims that could distort near-term priorities. At the same time, AI and quantum could create parallel risks before they converge. AI is changing cyber offense and defense, and quantum computing could threaten current encryption systems. Together, these trends strengthen the case for timely action on cybersecurity and cryptographic resilience. Third, what this means for policy. The co-evolution of AI and quantum technologies is faster than regulatory systems are designed to respond. Both are dual-use technologies. Advances in civilian applications can also carry security implications. This creates a classical governance challenge. Regulate too early and constrain innovation. Regulate too late and the technology becomes difficult to shape. Canada therefore needs adaptive governance, a mix of legislation, standards, and technical oversight that can evolve with the technology. Canada also needs coherence across government. innovation, economic development, export controls, research, security, and national defense, which are often handled through separate mandates. Without coordination, policies can work against each other. For example, if export controls are poorly designed for emerging quantum technologies, that could limit access to talent, supply chains, or collaboration with trusted allies. Because these technologies are global, Canada should coordinate with key partners, including NATO and the G7, to reduce fragmentation and align approaches where possible. In conclusion, AI is becoming part of the technical foundation of quantum technologies, while quantum computing could eventually influence some future AI systems. At the same time, both technologies may independently reshape cybersecurity, economic competitiveness, and strategic power. This matters for Canada's long-term prosperity and security, and it calls for careful, evidence-based policy grounded in realism rather than speculation. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sanders. Okay, colleagues, witnesses will now enter into the first round of questions. Mr. Guglielmin, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your opening testimony. I think I'll begin by just highlighting the fact that artificial intelligence clearly has some enormous potential. This committee is no stranger to some of the major productivity issues that's facing this country. And, adopting and deploying AI can certainly help companies become more competitive, and it can help us with our productivity issues. In telecommunications, AI could help with outages, improve network reliability, strengthen cybersecurity, which is something that's going to be very important as we go forward. But the question for this committee is not should we be adopting AI, because that's obviously the case. The question is whether we're going to harness AI for our strategic capabilities and our strategic industries, or if it's going to become another tool for offshoring Canadian jobs, offshoring Canadian data, and really allowing Canada to lose its control over its own infrastructure and security. So, Ms. Blais, I think I'm going to start with you, because CUPE's criticized the federal AI consultation process as relying overly on corporate voices and not capturing enough union voices, voices of privacy experts and researchers who study AI. Now, in sectors like telecom, where the adoption of AI could affect jobs, personal data, personal network security, and national sovereignty, what risks would you say are created if the government designs AI policy without capturing these voices?
C'est une très bonne question que vous posez, une très
That is a very good question that you're asking, and a very broad question. There are a number of risks connected with AI that are not necessarily connected with telecommunications networks. And as I'm here to represent the Canadian Alliance of Telecommunication Workers, I'm going to limit it to those risks. But there is a risk of losing jobs, as you mentioned. And at present, in telecommunications businesses, we see a drop in the number of jobs that is happening quickly. We've lost between 15 and 20,000 jobs in the last 15 to 20 years. And also, there are all kinds of risks connected with our personal data that pass through telecommunication networks. And we know that AI systems, generative AI systems now being used, are mostly south of the border. And as a result, our data, when we use those systems, are going through telecommunications networks that are not Canadian. And when the data are not in our own networks on our territory, then they are subject to the legislation of other territories. Accordingly, if our data goes through the United States, for example, 25% of the internet traffic goes through the United States at present. So all of those data which are moving through the United States are protected by American legislation, which doesn't protect us as well as citizens as do Canadian laws. If we don't take into account the voice of workers and the voice of the population, because people, I don't feel that there's a consultation, really a broad consultation being done on AI, then the risk is that we may lose track of certain things, whether it's personal data, whether it's for discrimination, because we know that there are AI systems that have biases as well. So that is also a risk. And if some of the AI systems are not designed here and are not built using our data or trained using our data, then we're subject to getting responses from those systems that are not suitable to our environment. So yes, the criticism is valid because the government seems to be focused only towards a commercial type AI strategy rather than focusing on the well-being of the entire population.
Fair Fair to say that at this point, from the perspective of telecom companies, the government has focused too heavily on how quickly we could adopt and deploy AI, and not enough on whether Canadians are protected from the consequences of that deployment?
Je pense qu'on peut le dire, oui. Quel est le...
Yes, I think we can say that. What is our plan B? We don't know what pathway AI will take exactly, but economists don't agree, experts don't agree. But if we had to face job losses on a large basis, would the employment insurance system be enough? We don't know. So we need to have a broad-based consultation, and as of now, all the advisory committees for the government seem instead to be focusing on science and commercial development rather than on social development.
Mr. Mandryk, Minister Solomon said that Canada's refreshed AI strategy would come in the first quarter of this year, but as we know, that deadline's passed. Now the government says it's coming soon. From the perspective of telecom workers, what's the cost of Ottawa delaying a clear AI framework?
A good question, and I'm proud to represent the voices of telecom workers, tech workers, and pretty much all workers in Canada when it comes to AI. You can't have a conversation about AI without it eventually leading to, yeah, but it's going to take away my jobs. And a proper AI framework from the government and the regulations that will come with it are important to adopt quickly. Canadians are worried about AI adoption and AI replacing their work. We've always stood behind innovation and automation as these are tools that will help us enhance our work. And I think what needs to be part of the conversation ongoing and moving forward is how AI can be that tool. It's great to hear from my fellow witnesses that we need to work together with government and industry, but a very important part of industry are the workers that are the lifeblood of that industry. And if Canadian workers see AI as that opportunity, as my fellow witness, Mr. Beer, said, I think that there will be some hope versus that anxiety over what's to come. And that's why something that from the government really needs to happen quickly to give Canadians reassurance of this emerging technology.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Guglielmin. J'ai pris l'habitude de dire bienvenue.
So I'm accustomed to saying welcome, but I'm going to do that once again. We have a new member of the committee, Mr. Natumba. Over to you, sir, for the next 6 minutes. Hello, everyone. Hello to the witnesses and the members of the committee. Thank you for your welcome. I recently met Mr. Leblanc and Ms. Blais in my office with our team. And Mr. Leblanc, you represent an organization that has some more than 315,000 members across the country, including 6,400 in telecommunications. And today we're talking about AI, but if we turn back to the beginning of the human era, there have been a lot of challenges. Humans have always been able to see how to come back and take control of things. So in the current AI landscape and commercialization of AI in Canada, how does it compare to the international market? It's an excellent question. Thank you for the question, Mr. Ntumba. For telecommunications workers, who are in fact workers that have some control or the ability to transfer information. And AI does not exist without a root. The root is the internet. The internet being what it is, it's controlled within the country a lot by the three major companies that we all know in telecommunications. Our current experience as workers is an experience that is fairly darkened because jobs in the model of the past are disappearing quickly, and transformations that are occurring now, as we see in the media and we see in the news this week. There is a huge amount of transformation happening. This transformation is ongoing without necessarily having the right education and change of strategic direction for major Canadian industries. Instead, what we're seeing is unloading of workers across the entire industry. And we're seeing a huge shock in telecommunications right now. The logical bridge would be to invest in transforming those workers into AI specialists, because there's a huge amount of knowledge that is closely connected to the existing model. However, that's not happening, and it's transforming a lot. So, in answer to the question of transforming AI, in the Alliance, we agree with the idea that AI exists. AI is already present, and AI has a number of advantages coming, but we're also aware of the impact of automation and of AI in our industry, because we've experienced a great deal over the last several decades. So our workers are very apprehensive about the situation and the development of AI, because they don't see the link or the transfer, you could say, between this industry towards the new era. Thank you. Ms. Blais, your organization represents some 70,000 members. And my question is, as of today, what should be the government's priority, the federal government's priorities, to support proper adoption of AI in a responsible manner across the government system and across the country?
Il y a plusieurs choses qu'on peut.
Well, there are a number of things that we can consider. There are things that the government is already bringing in, which seem to be going in the right direction. If we want to talk about data sovereignty, sovereign AI, all of that is very positive. On the other hand, it's the social dialogue that is now missing. There needs to be an exchange of information between workers, those who are in the population, and there's literacy to be developed too. There are often people who think that they're conversing with a person using an AI system, whereas it's not the case. So how do those systems work? Are they probabilistic systems that use probabilities to arrive at an answer? If we don't know that, then we think that those systems are giving us the truth, whereas that's not the case. So there's some education to be done for the population, of course. And we also need to take into account what we'll be doing in the future with AI, and how we're going to use that tool is very important. And right now, we're only talking about commercialization without talking about the common good and how this instrument can be used to bring us towards something better, rather than toward job losses that will not be offset by a social network system that's sufficiently strong, because we will not have forecast what is coming. You're referring to when we talked about a social dialogue. Could you develop on that? What do you mean behind those words for the social order? Briefly, please. We would like to see consultations done by the government having to do more with what the researchers and businesses do, but also we should include civil society organizations, unions, and workers. Thank you very much, Mr. Ntuba. Hello, Mr. Saint-Marie. You have 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And hello to the witnesses. Your presence here is very important today. Okay, there were some microphone problems. I would also like to welcome Ms. Begum and Mr. Ntumba. Welcome to the committee, and congratulations to Ms. Begum for your election with clear numbers. I would like to thank my colleague Jean Denis for having supported me in the first few minutes of this committee. My first question is for Ms. Blais, and all my questions will be for the Alliance. When coming to the Committee for a Study on AI, the representative TELUS explained to us that sovereign capacity on data involves 3 things. 1, Canadian laws protecting data apply. Secondly, no foreign legislation applies to those data, especially not laws that require sharing the data with the state. 3, no switch with outside the country can interfere with the data. We talk a lot about data storage, but not so much about data transportation. Recently, Rogers delocalized its internet into India, and the Indian legislation requires all data to be made available to the Indian government, and we know that there have been tensions between Canada and India recently. Can you say whether Canadian telecommunications should be protected against delocalization that could cause possible foreign interference? Absolutely. I think that is something that is now missing in the regulations. Bill C-8, which is currently being studied, could solve part of the issue if the government determines that there are supply chains and services that are harmful to the system. On the other hand, I think we can act upstream as well and right away decide that certain types of delocalization ought not to be allowed. You're talking about Rogers, and in fact, it's the cell phone system and the control center of the cell phones that is switched to India. And my colleague Corey could give you more information on how things are being done there. As regards Indian legislation, what they're saying is that all of the data that are on equipment in India may be seized by the government. So sure, our data can be made accessible to a government that is not necessarily sympathetic to our cause at present.
For background, last year about this time, Rogers Communications let about 400 of its workers in the wireless department know that it no longer required them as employees. They still needed them to do what they were doing, but pushed them off to become contractors with Ericsson. And so Ericsson Canada took them on as employees, and the folks that worked in the back end, the technicians who deal with voice quality, voice messaging, all that stuff, a few months after they were hired by Ericsson, again, doing the exact same work on the Rogers network, were told to start training workers from the Ericsson branch in India to do their work, and that work would be transferred over. So now the Network Operations Center is centered in Noida, India, as are the technicians who look after all the components that make our cell phones work. Our stance is that when you have operational control or operational capacity, if you're losing that stuff from within our border, we're now dependent on workers outside of our border to take care of our networks. And the question begs, what is data sovereignty and that digital sovereignty? Sovereignty, as you mentioned, having that kill switch, our physical borders, we have the ability to close it down as we did during COVID. But what happens with a digital border? Do we have that ability to stop that traffic from leaving and or coming in? Those questions have yet to be really sussed out well, and I'm happy to have those conversations ongoing, but those are some of the big concerns.
Thank you very much. So for the three from the Alliance, can you say whether telecommunications companies are letting people off strictly on account of AI? It's a good question. In fact, the use of AI and the adding of AI into the major telephone companies is being done in a very subtle and gradual way over a long period. So it's difficult to directly attribute it at this stage. However, it's true that it has an impact, and we are seeing that increasingly when we talk about layoffs of 3,500 workers in a large company or 10,000 workers in another one, as we've recently heard. There are major questions to be asked about how the work will be done, because often, as I've said, in telecommunications, the work is done one way or another. It's quite simply a matter of a large bubble that is burst and it becomes bigger somewhere else. So we have a lot of questions about that. Thank you. And I'd like to ask one last question, and then I'll have another 2.5 minute turn later. But are there any protections against technology change in the Canadian Labour Code, and is AI considered as a technology change in the code? In 1 minute. Yes, there is protection in the Canada Labour Code. There's a clause on technology changes. However, that clause dates back to a period when one could open a wall in a plant to bring in a machine and you could see it coming in, which is no longer the case. And the employers are sidestepping those clauses by using voluntary departure offers rather than layoffs. So it kind of goes unnoticed. And as AI is not transparent, it comes in through a computer and you don't see it coming, and everything is all set up and deployed even before the union is informed. So it's hard to have a conversation on how the work is going to be done with AI, because there are also risks to psychological health of workers. And we would like to have those discussions to look at the interesting work and use AI to improve our work, but that's not what is being done now. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Marie.
Thank you to all of our witnesses for coming here and for your presentations. Mr. Saunders, I would like to begin with you. You've previously attended this committee and spoke about quantum computing. Can you, in very quickly in layman's language, tell our people watching this committee proceeding, what do you mean by quantum computing?
Okay, so quantum computing is really just computing. It's just got a better engine. So if you think about building a computer, nowadays we hear about GPUs from NVIDIA, so there's a way of doing certain kinds of math better. Quantum computing is really about inserting a chip that is not about speeding up computing, but making certain hard problems easy to solve. So that's what we're aiming for.
Thank you. I'm sure that'll help folks understand what we're talking about. In your previous presentations to committee, you talked about the importance of working internationally. Our focus the last year or two has been on data sovereignty and keeping things domestic. Are you still of the opinion that we need to be focused internationally?
Yes, I'll elaborate. So, I mean, I'm very aware of the tension between open versus digital sovereignty, and I just spent 3 months at CERN involved with the Open Quantum Institute and dealing with exactly that kind of tension. Yes, we need to work internationally because Canada alone can't do great things, but it doesn't mean we have to work closely with every country. So we need to, like NATO, we need to...
Wisely?
Pardon me?
We need to choose our dance partners wisely?
Correct. Well said. And then NATO, G7 are very good examples of how we can build international partnerships.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Beer, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your domestic focus. I found very intriguing they sat you beside each other. You've indicated very strongly that you feel that we very much need to have a domestic solution for AI and for data centers, domestically owned, domestically located, domestically managed. How important is it that the workforce is also domestic?
I think it's absolutely critical. I think Canadian companies have relied on Canadian workers to drive the economy and support critical healthcare initiatives, education, energy services. So yeah, the Canadian labor piece is absolutely critical. I think Canadians have a unique set of values that we honor together. I think there's an element of closeness and understanding our fellow companies that we work with. So yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. And the bottom line is we have some incredibly skilled folks in Canada domestically, whether it's electricians, whether it's mechanical folks, construction companies, professional services companies. And so we have all the labor to deliver these services today, and there's no reason whatsoever why we ought to be relying on international companies, particularly those that are disguising themselves as Canadian companies, and there's quite a bit of that going on right now.
Okay, you've answered some of my other questions already by indicating that we do have the talent here in Canada to operate these systems and manage them. You've twice now said our Canadian values. Can you briefly describe what do you mean by Canadian values? It can mean different things to different people. My second question will be, if you could answer that as well. Our other panelists have indicated that our telecoms provide the majority of the communication transportation highways for AI. Do our telecoms provide sufficient and secure enough services to meet the requirements, for example, of the data centers? Yeah. So firstly on values, I mean, I think Canadians are well known to be fair, high integrity people. We operate transparently with one another, and there's a very unique set of those values that isn't shared by the global sphere these days. So I think primarily it's being transparent with one another. Sure, it's focusing on building and growing, but it's doing it in a fair and open manner. And then secondarily on the network piece,
I think our Canadian networks are well equipped to be able to handle AI workloads, and whether it's the capacity or the security. And that isn't the case with all international carriers. And I'm quite proud of our Canadian carriers, whether it's Bell or whether it's Rogers or TELUS, but they have good security protocols. They have good capacity management, and that isn't the case for all telecommunication carriers globally.
Thank you. I think I'm out of time. I'm not out of questions. I'm just out of time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Falk. Madame O'Rourke, floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Carr. Monsieur Leblanc, merci beaucoup pour votre présentation.
Mr. LeBlanc, thank you very much for your presentation. It will be important to come back to this more comprehensively to see what are the job losses that have already occurred in the last few years, and also the potential of AI in coming years. So it's well noted with Ms. Blais also the importance of the civil society conversation, first of all, to see how it can improve day-to-day life, because there is a lot of potential there. So I want to thank you for your remarks.
Questions for you. So many questions for you. The Monk School put out a document called Sovereign by Design, Strategic Options for Canadian AI Sovereignty. And they argue that sovereignty in the AI era means freedom from coercion, not digital isolationism or technological self-sufficiency. So they maintain there isn't a country in the world that can achieve complete independence across the AI technology stack, and that our challenge is how to structure those dependencies to preserve choice, reduce foreign leverage, and ensure that our Canadian data and infrastructure remain governed by Canadian laws and values. So, Mr. Sanders and Mr. Beer seem to be on opposite sides of the spectrum, but what this recommendation looks at is that in Europe, there's a way to have coalition building and hybrid strategies. And what do you think of that approach? Mr. Sanders?
Sure. So I support the message of that Monk document. Some things we can do by ourselves, but the future is coming faster than we expected, and I think we need to work together. I don't think I'm disagreeing with my colleague at all. I understand the need for jobs, but if we're going to keep up with the race and stay ahead, we need to work through good governance, regulation, standards, et cetera, and not cut off in fast-moving tech.
Okay. And Mr. Beer, did you want to interject? And just real quick, because I've got some more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I believe we absolutely need to operate globally. We just need to be very careful around who we're working with. And so I think particularly for Canada, there's some amazing opportunities to work with the EU, again, who we share with some very common values and a focus on a desire to build, and again, a common set of values. So it doesn't mean that we need to be parochial and we're only operating inside Canada. There's very much a global piece, but it's not everyone.
That's really helpful. And Canada was a leader in AI, right? 3 of the godfathers of AI are from here, and so we absolutely want to keep that knowledge and those jobs here. Mr. Beer, you said that your organization services banking, energy, healthcare, and defense. And so it ties in with this report from the Monk School around there can be a hierarchy of sensitivity of data. And there are things that need to be fully sovereign and other things that may not need to be fully sovereign. Would you agree with that sort of conclusion, or would you add to that? The challenge with coming out with an AI strategy that's fully baked and all the regs are there is it will be, unusable tomorrow. Things are changing so quickly. So how do we navigate that? The protection of the really, really critical domestic data and then other uses.
Yeah, I think it's a data classification exercise. And to your point, not all data is the same, and some data will be low risk, and it's not, as an example, healthcare. Healthcare, we need to be incredibly sensitive and careful around how that's treated. But yeah, there's some other types of transactions and some other types of data that are perfectly well suited for, software as a service applications where geography isn't as important. But healthcare has some incredibly important data, of course. Energy, I mean, many of our energy companies have seismic data, decades and decades of seismic data that needs to be protected. And of course, there's intellectual property that needs to be protected. So yeah, there's a real data classification exercise that needs to run by sector. And some of those we can push to AI services with more ease than others.
Great. I want to go back to Mr. Sanders. You talked about AI helping to accelerate quantum. We've heard the whole range of perceptions on AI, from pause to, and the jobs will be gone in 18 to 24 months. So I was glad you said we need to avoid exaggerated claims. So why is it important to proceed with AI adoption with the right regs? Why is it important to proceed at this time?
I think that we're one part of a large world, and the world is racing ahead on AI, and it's going to grow and happen wherever it happens to be. And I think for Canadians, we have to be smart about how we engage and not hide from it.
And then at this
Mr.
point,
Burke.
oh no.
I'm sorry.
Oh, every time.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to follow up.
Monsieur Saint-Marie, 2 minutes 30 seconds.
Mr. Saint-Marie, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair. I won't have time to ask all my questions. Through the clerk, I would like to send you a list of questions that I could have asked. If you would be good enough to answer, we could include this in the document we'll be preparing. But I would like to ask 2 questions, one after the other. How fast do you see AI developing in the country? And why do we need a social dialogue focusing around AI? In 2 minutes, if it's possible. Well, as to speed, we don't know exactly how fast it's going to move forward. On the other hand, there are more and more people who are getting close to that speed as things now stand. And your second question is the social dialogue, right? Well, we need to establish it with all the partners of civil society. And if I can just go back to a question by Ms. O'Rourke earlier, I think it's all critical services, the 10 or 12 ones that are recognized by public safety as services that at least ought to be also be protected. We ought to ensure that we have data sovereignty for all of those sectors, including telecommunications. And it is possible the CRTC has already regulated for 911 in the next generation that the telecommunications firms keep all their equipment on Canadian soil. So why not do so for other services as well in telecommunications, apart from emergency services? If we can do so, let's do so. Could you say whether it's relevant for the House here to create a special standing committee on AI, seeing as it covers many sectors? That could be an excellent idea, indeed. Very well. Well, I have 10 seconds left, so I will send you my questions by email. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie. 45 seconds left. Very well. Then I can do another one. Could you please talk about other countries that are looking at repatriating telecommunications into their own borders?
I do know that last year, in India, they host the largest telecommunications conference in the continent, and the theme of that conference was self-reliance. I know that they're trying to create those systems in other countries, while at the same time hosting work that our networks are dependent on. I think we should take note and really hammer out some domestic policies that look after not only the citizens of the country, but the workers that support those citizens.
There's also the United States. Last year, we started working on legislation to repatriate call centers that are outside the country. And the FCC, the equivalent of our CRTC, but in the States, in March, they launched a consultation on repatriation of call centers of telecommunications firms so that Americans can better protect their personal data and have a guarantee that they can talk to someone within American soil. And we think we ought to do the same thing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
I'd first just like to thank and welcome our new committee members. Welcome to this committee. We're very happy to have you and look forward to working with you today and in the studies moving forward. So you're very welcome here. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today as well. Really appreciate your expert testimony. It's an excellent study and quite a range of perspectives today. I just want to ask a few questions of Mr. Mandryk. I know in the fall we touched base on and did some important work together regarding some offshoring of critical jobs. You've touched on this today. They were background technician jobs, and that was offshored. And in the context of the conversation today, I'm wondering if you can just elaborate on the confidence or lack of confidence that gives you on how Canada is entering this phase of, cybersecurity, data protection. Where do you feel that those jobs land in terms of what should remain in our borders and what we could perhaps offshore if a company so chose to do so? I think you're of the opinion that these jobs should not have been offshored for security reasons and other reasons. Is that correct?
That is correct, and thank you for the question, and thank you for the work that we did together back in October in trying to keep those jobs here in Canada. When Rogers moved these workers over to Ericsson, and a few months later Ericsson decided to offshore the work to India, my phone blew up. As an organizer, we were in the midst of organizing that group. Obviously, when a major shift like that happens to their employment, we were there to sign cards and hopefully build some stability for them. My phone absolutely blew up. And if you're not listening to the technicians whose hands are on the infrastructure, who work on this infrastructure, who upload new software, making sure that everything is functioning and working, that we don't have to think about it, they were the ones who were the most concerned. I think I must have heard dozens and dozens of times, if you knew what I knew, if you did the work that I did, you would be petrified of that work going overseas. Now, what concerns me, and I think concerns organized labor as well, is that the companies that are doing this have earned a trusted status within government to be able to manage their networks, and they have to a good degree. But when the work starts to expand overseas and operational control and operational capacity is given to, because they weren't taken, they were willingly given by Rogers and Ericsson to workers overseas, that's when the concern starts to happen. And this is where the voice of the workers need to be a part of whatever dialogue we're having on the future of AI. The actual hands-on knowledge of where things are buried and what works and why it does is important to know. Those voices should be listened to, especially when it comes to national security.
So you would support sort of perhaps it seems like an enhanced, modernized, some sort of data classification system of that perhaps these jobs and others like them should remain sovereign in Canada's control and not be externalized or offshored. Is that correct? Like, are you feeling that the government doesn't have that standard or is not meeting that standard or should revisit that standard?
Well, and standards are actually an interesting way to put it. That's true, and the standards that are governed by the federal government are there for federally regulated industries like aviation and telecom and banking. Mm-hmm. What's happening and what we've noticed with the Ericsson situation with Rogers is when those workers were moved over, Ericsson opposed our application at the Canada Labour Board saying that they're not a telecom company. These workers aren't federally regulated anymore. They're provincial. So all of a sudden, the accountability federally for workers who are in telecom, again, hands on the infrastructure, is now being diluted by companies who are saying, well, maybe we should only be governed by the provincial laws and not the federal laws.
Thank you. And Mr. Beer, similar vein of questions for you in my last minute. On the data centers, do you see similar security concerns given the amount of Canadian data that goes through foreign, particularly American data centers and operated by Americans? And it could be any country. I think if it was any country, should we be concerned? Do you have similar area of concern in this?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And whether it's network inspection, which is technically possible, and you can intercept traffic. I think that's a very real concern. I think there's also just the other element that we haven't touched on much is foreign entities clogging up our power interconnect queues. Such that we can't drive digital innovation for for Canadian companies and for very legitimate Canadian services. And AI is wonderful, but the foundation of technology today is the energy and healthcare customers and financial services customers. And so we've got to be very, very careful to ensure that, from a power perspective, that we're not turning away all of our power to international companies and depriving Canadian companies from being able to digitally innovate. And whether that's traditional CPU-based applications or GPU and AI, it's an increasing risk for Canadians.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Madame Dancho. Ms. Begum, again, I'll take the opportunity to welcome you to committee, congratulate you on your recent election, and give you the floor for the first time here at Industry. You'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Thank you to all of you, to all my colleagues. It's wonderful to be here. Also, a pleasant surprise to see colleagues that I've worked with in the past, and I know we've worked together to, I think, both that we're talking about a nice balance of having digital sovereignty and worker sovereignty, and making sure that we stand up for a growing economy, a growing market, and of course the growth of this nation. It's a pleasure to be here as a provincial member. I had done similar work, so it's not too new, but of course this is a much different platform, so it's great to be here. And Corey, or Mr. Mandrick, I should say, great to have worked with you to represent workers who I think do the tough work, making sure that people are connected across the country and across the world, and thank you for everything you do. This is actually great to have this study, I think, in terms of how we move forward, because I know the government has a strong mandate to be able to really bring the country forward in really catching up with what, Mr. Sanders, you've been talking about, because we can't just have a pause and we can't just be behind in terms of what's happening, but at the same time, how do we do it wisely, and who we make friendship with, and how do we make sure that we are representing our workers well. One of the things that I think that's going to be a key component is, and I feel like you've already answered a little bit of it, and I'll give the opportunity to anyone who would like to answer, is do you feel that we have digital sovereignty right now at this stage where we are? And if not, what are some of the things can we do to make sure that we create that nice balance to get to that point? Maybe I'll start with, I know you haven't spoken as much as Mr. Beers and Mr. Sanders, so maybe I'll ask Ms. Blair or Mr. LeBlanc. I know Unifor is big on that, so go ahead.
Well, yes, Unifor is big on national sovereignty. We talk a lot about auto, but when we talk about the other sectors that we represent, our vision is that for Canadians, by Canadians, operating by Canadians as well. I think the example of my colleagues are concerning, some of the examples that we've heard recently. And we ought to turn our mind towards what do we want as a country, and we believe that with the proper criteria set in place, this industry can be developed and can strive because we are able as Canadians to do so. Our examples of the day were really concerning the end user component. But overall, we do cherish the thought and the vision of expanding AI. We want to do so. But we want to make sure that there is the right string attached going forward so that it benefits the Canadians, that it has a proper goal, a higher goal than simply capitalization. So that's one of the key components for our unions.
Mr. Mandrick, thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc.
To expand on that, the Telecommunications Act and it being governed federally is important as it binds Canadians together. We communicate with each other across provincial borders. Those of us in this room are probably old enough to remember back in the day when the telephone companies owned the telephone in your house, right? We're at a place right now where these telecommunication companies are quickly moving towards a dumb pipe business model that will be working at the behest of hyperscalers, most of which exist in the States. So we're going to be relying on the services of the Amazons, the Googles, the ChatGPTs of the world, moving through the telecommunications infrastructure that Canadians have built over the decades, and now the jobs being lost. So regulation needs to keep up with what's going on. Technology is moving fast, extremely fast, and I believe one of my colleagues here mentioned how regulation is not moving fast enough, and that's just the nature of the beast. But when you have telecommunication companies moving into telcos, they're moving from telcos to techcos. We need to follow that and make sure the regulations are tight enough to ensure that the infrastructure that was built by Canadians still serve Canadians through Canadian jobs and Canadian sovereignty.
Thank you very much. And I believe my time was way over, so I appreciate the indulgence.
Not way over, just on the mark, Ms. Begum.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, witnesses, thanks very much for availing yourselves to the committee today. We appreciate the input and the guidance. It's very useful in terms of the next steps that we will take to provide some advice to the government on where we think we need to go moving forward. Colleagues, we're going to suspend briefly to transition into the second hour. Suspended. To move forward with the second hour of testimony here today, if I can ask everybody to take their seats. We have one witness with us in person, two joining virtually. By video conference, we have with us, appearing as an individual, Fenwick McKelvey, Associate Professor, Information and Communication Technology Policy at Concordia University. Welcome, Mr. McKelvey. We've got from Quantum Industry Canada, Lisa Lambert, the Chief Executive Officer. And we have from the Centre for International Governance and Innovation, Jim Balsillie, the founder and chair. Je peux confirmer que tous les tests sont pris pour.
I can confirm that all the tests have been done to ensure the visual and sound quality.
Upwards of 5 minutes, sir, followed by Ms. Lambert, and then we'll go to Mr. Balsillie here in person. The floor is yours, Mr. McKelvey.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging I'm speaking from unceded Indigenous lands. The Kainai Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which I speak today. So my name is Fenwick McKelvey, and I'm an Associate Professor in Information and Communication Technology Policy at the Department of Communication Studies at Concordia University. My remarks today draw on over 10 years of experience in algorithmic and AI governance in Canada. In that time, I've been a lead on major national and international research projects, a co-director of an AI research institute, and a frequent commentator on Canada's AI strategy. I've been a witness, critic, and occasional participant in the Pan-Canadian AI strategy too. I want to begin by emphasizing that Canada has a right to regulate AI. These technologies are inherently public technologies, in the same way that railways, highways, and cell phones have required public regulation, AI does too. AI regulation should not just be economic, but social as well. The production and use of AI inherently interacts with human rights, and the government has a duty to protect those rights, especially the growing impacts of gender-based impacts. Canada's branch plan industrial policy on AI so far has moved too slowly to protect these rights. We cannot focus on productivity while ignoring quality of work or economic opportunity without seeing the winners and losers. Such myopia puts Canadians at risk, puts governments at risk. Politicians and parties need to read the room and understand the growing public sentiment against the AI industry today. AI regulation requires new approaches to commons management and the protection of public knowledge systems. AI is a commons management issue, and we are already feeling the strain generative AI has put on our collective institutions like our media systems and public knowledge infrastructures as well. We have a history of building public media in this country and an opportunity to build public AI too. We need to define a vision for the future of this technology that works for all Canadians, and future policy must ensure we have the regulatory capacity, independence, and financial means to achieve this vision. Universities are critical to steward the knowledge commons, but are in crisis. The Pan-Canadian AI strategy must extend beyond its 3 research centers and include greater participation from the social sciences, arts, and humanities. If AI is truly a problem for all of Canadian society, that challenge demands the participation of all of Canada's public institutions and facilities, from faculties from coast to coast. Canada must do better with public participation when developing its AI policy. Sprints and AI-assisted What We Heard reports undermine the ethos of democratic participation, contributing to consistent public opinion polls reporting low trust by Canadians around AI. By contrast, a coalition of civil society organizations launched the People's Consultation for AI last year in French and English. The consultation received over 70 submissions. Myself and fellow researcher Joanna Redden are working now to analyze these comments. At first glance, we are struck by the depth and the sophistication of the responses. To build Canada's capacity to regulate AI, we need to hear more from these voices from civil society and for those most affected by AI, and they need to be better included in how Canada listens and understands the impacts of this technology, both social and economic. Indigenous voices need special consideration in Canada's AI governance. Canada's true potential with AI can only happen through reconciliation and respect for nation-to-nation governance that understands and celebrates the distinct knowledge systems contained within our shared territories and their influence and significance for understanding these technologies we call AI. The challenge ahead is daunting and exacerbated by long-term regulatory gaps. We are trying now to deal with AI empires when in the past we have struggled with social media, platforms, and even newspaper barons. The task is great, but the time is now to act towards a more inclusive, social approach to AI governments that meets the challenges of our time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. McKelvey. Okay, Ms. Lambert, we'll turn the floor to you for upwards of 5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du comité, merci de me donner l'occasion de comparer.
Chair, committee members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear today.
That is often blurred in policy discussions. AI and quantum are distinct technologies, and grouping them as a single category creates real risk in both policy and execution. AI is about learning from data, identifying patterns, making predictions, and automating decisions using today's computing hardware. Quantum is something categorically different. It's a fundamentally different way of processing information on new hardware, making certain classes of problems approachable in entirely new ways, including problems that are effectively out of reach today. Quantum also includes sensing and communications, enabling new ways to detect, navigate, and secure our world. But for this discussion, I'll focus mainly on quantum computing. If AI is about extracting insight from data, quantum computing is about expanding what is computationally possible. These are distinct technologies with different capabilities, timelines, risks, and policy needs. If we group them together wholesale, we risk misjudging those risks, misapplying regulation, and missing the specific opportunities and vulnerabilities each presents. They're also complementary. AI is accelerating quantum development, and the future of compute is not replacement, but convergence. AI, high-performance computing, and quantum computing working in concert. As AI scales, limits are emerging in energy, cost, and sheer compute. Quantum computing offers, over time, potential paths through some of those constraints. Other countries are already making coordinated investments in this convergence. Canada has the ingredients to lead: strength in AI, a world-class quantum ecosystem, deep computing expertise. But today, we lack a fully integrated strategy that looks across these technologies, rather than treating them in isolation, and fully leverages our quantum strengths. That means integrating and scaling Canada's quantum champions as a core part of our frontier compute strategy. Now let me turn to an issue that cuts across everything you're studying: cybersecurity. Quantum and AI are on converging timelines, already threatening the integrity of our systems today. AI is already changing the nature of cyber attacks. At the same time, adversaries are harvesting encrypted data today, government communications, financial records, sensitive intellectual property, with the expectation of decrypting it once quantum computers mature. This is not a future threat, it's a present one. Canada has taken an important step. In June 2025, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity released its roadmap for migration to post-quantum cryptography. Departmental migration plans were due this month, so effectively by end of day today. High-priority government systems must be completed by 2031. The question now is execution, because this isn't just a migration. It's a generational opportunity to strengthen our cryptographic foundations, making them more agile and resilient against a rapidly evolving threat landscape. The Cyber Centre's roadmap covers federal IT infrastructure, but Canada's economic and national security depends on a far broader ecosystem: critical infrastructure, financial systems, supply chains, and the small and medium enterprises across them. In an interconnected system like digital infrastructure, the weakest link defines the risk. Government must now clearly signal with urgency that this transition extends across the entire economy, not just federal departments. That means using procurement, already identified in the roadmap, to pull the market forward, extending expectations to critical infrastructure, and ensuring Canada is equipped to execute, not just set direction, but build the capacity and coordination to act. If we get this right, we do more than mitigate the quantum threat. We build a foundation of trust that underpins AI adoption, quantum deployment, economic resilience, and national security. Many Canadian firms are leaders in developing the quantum-safe solutions required. This is both a security imperative and a commercial opportunity. So 3 points to leave you with. First, AI and quantum are distinct technologies and must be treated as such in policy and regulation while recognizing their evolving convergence. Second, the future of compute lies in the convergence of AI and quantum, and Canada has the ingredients to lead if we move at pace to scale our quantum strengths, so early leadership translates into enduring advantage. And third, on cybersecurity, federal plans were due this month. The window for preparation is now. What this committee can do is ensure that execution and accountability follow across government and across the entire Canadian economy. Je vous remercie. Je serai heureuse de...
Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Balsillie, welcome. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation to appear today. The global economy has undergone an unprecedented 40-year transformation where wealth, power, and security are rooted in the ownership and control of intangible assets, intellectual property, and AI data. These assets behave differently than tangible goods and require different strategies. Today, they dominate, comprising 92% of the S&P 500's $55 trillion value, as shown on Figure 1. Because Canada's economic thinking remains rooted in the 1970s, a tangible production economy era. Because of this, as shown in Figure 2, Canada has been in a structural 40-year decline, ranking last in the G7 in productivity per capita, and is projected to remain the worst-performing advanced economy in the OECD for the next 40 years. I illustrate on Figure 3 that Canada's original sin was missing the geopolitical shift in 1994 with their highly publicized Orange Book, which reinforced policies unfit for the emerging knowledge economy. Canadians are experiencing this decline in their everyday lives, especially during the emergence of the AI data-driven economy over the last 15 years, where Figure 4 shows that the $1 trillion per year GDP divergence to the U.S. over this period, which is equivalent to $100,000 annually per family of 4. Figure 5 shows the exfiltration through Canada's outdated FDI strategies. Figure 6 summarizes how Canada's prosperity and security, especially in intangibles economy of IP and data AI, are restricted due to poorly negotiated trade agreements that focus on the 1970s economy. My remarks today focus on 3 linked strategies Canada must employ for its data AI policy. Number 1, fit-for-purpose privacy legislation. Number 2, expertise to perform economic statecraft via regulatory frameworks. And number 3, sovereign commercial alternatives. Privacy and AI governance is a human rights issue. Figure 7 illustrates how inadequate governance in Canada of AI and data enabled a surveillance economy that caused a litany of harms to Canadians. They manipulate economic outcomes, enabling algorithmic pricing and wage suppression, raising costs while lowering incomes, as my recent op-ed explains in Figure 8. Surveillance models also circumvent knowledge rights I list in Figure 9, which I map in Figure 10 to failing Canada's commitments under the ICCPR. Figure 11 summarizes big tech capture and ensuing failure of the 2 recent attempts to upgrade PIPEDA. Canada cannot afford a third such misfire. Canada's policy thinking never understood the central role of economic statecraft that created the intangibles economy for AI and more. In the ensuing appendices, I will briefly summarize examples from just the last year where the U.S. deployed sophisticated capacity and strategies to utilize legal frameworks of economic statecraft to advance their prosperity and security. Figure 12 shows that Canada is essentially absent in the 3 million AI patents issued globally, despite our taxpayers funding foundational research. The resulting large and growing deficit on IP payments and receipts would be much, much larger if data flows were included. Figure 13 shows the U.S. advancing its interests through coordinated policy instruments, including the AI White Paper, Genius Act, IEEPA tariffs, and IP march-in rights. Figure 14 shows the U.S. push towards unified digital asset frameworks to control and capitalize on emerging tokenization opportunities. Figure 15 shows the U.S. national security strategy integrates standards, IP, and resource security into a single doctrine. Figure 16 summarizes how the U.S. PTO established a working group that embeds U.S. patents into global standards bodies to convert IP into market power. Figure 17 shows that when the U.S. exited multiple organizations, it deepened participation in 3 key standards bodies to convert IP into market power. Figure 17 shows that when the U.S. to more control over value chains. Figure 18 and 19 show how the U.S. and EU use standard setting to embed value capture and condition markets access, especially for AI. Figure 20 details the recently released U.S. AI legislative framework. Figure 21 shows how the U.S. PTO patent adjudication has been updated to favor domestic interests. Figure 22 shows how the U.S. advisory structures integrated industry feedback into USMCA negotiations and how restrictions on Canada were a feature, not a bug. Canada is not participating in any of this statecraft, which is technical and requires expertise and capacity. This urgently needs to change. In closing, we cannot do developing economy strategies and expect developed economy outcomes. In Figure 23, I list examples of sovereign commercial alternatives the government can and should support to ensure AI delivers more sovereign prosperity, security, and public good. This includes sovereign compute, national digital rails and unified ledger, a sovereign ad stack, and a sovereign job board. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Balsillie. Okay, Madame Dancho, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for your excellent testimony. And Mr. Balsillie, I have questions for you. I appreciate your considerable expertise in this area and also the evaluation of what Canada really needs to do to really catch up so that we can even hope to compete in this space and ensure that we're protecting our IP for the benefit of generations. So my first question to you is a simple one. If you were to evaluate the federal government's performance over the last year on AI, what grade would you give them?
I would score it a did not attend. You have to understand this is a race, and we haven't gotten out of the locker room. And the only thing that I've seen is giving $240 million to a foreign company under a sovereign compute program, which is kind of like giving cigarettes out to a school health program. It's the opposite. It takes our scarce money that takes us away from this urgent objective.
Can you go into a bit more detail about, I believe you're talking about CoreWeave and the interaction, like Cohere sort of hired or did hire CoreWeave to build their data center and operate it. What are some of the consequences to Canadian IP, if any, amongst other issues with that you see?
Well, that contract could have been a company maker for half a dozen great potential Canadian companies in sovereign compute. And now the wealth effects and the IP all flows to CoreWeave and its shareholders. Plus, it's governed under the U.S. Cloud Act so that we don't have sovereignty over the data that's there. We can't, that's not an inattention. That's an own goal of just the most severe proportions.
And so what do you think some of the core issues are? And you did outline them in your opening remarks, and thank you for the detailed report that you provided to the committee. There's some excellent tables and figures in here that I think are very pertinent to the AI study, especially where the issues are on our lack of capitalizing on our inherent success as having some of the fathers and founders of AI. But why do you think that the performance from your estimation and frankly from others has been so weak on AI?
All the thinking is from the 1970s, and I don't say that pejoratively. It behaves differently. It behaves opposite. And so I gave a keynote that some very senior people were there in November and on future of work and so on, and I was pleading to want to praise the budget. And I was pleading to want to praise this spring update to just show some signal. Sometimes when you people get stroke and they deny they have a right arm. It's called anagnosia. And we have anagnosia on the policy of intangibles. It's just, and so many very smart thoughtful people come to me and say, what's going wrong? And I just say, they're stuck, they're blind. No conscientious person, and I do believe there's many conscientious person, no conscientious person would behave like this if they were cognizant of the consequences of inattention. And I was severely disappointed in the spring economic statement. We were involved deeply prior to the budget. This $1 trillion divergence is going to get worse. The harms are going to get worse until we update our approaches and start attending to the real battle lines of the 21st century.
Mm. Thank you. And in a number of the tables and data that you provided, it looks like the U.S. is moving, at least recently, quite aggressively to, I guess, modernize, you could say, their approach to capitalizing on AI and other emerging and influential technologies. Are they a leader in this? Who's doing well, and where could we be looking, for example, is the EU, China? Like, who's bringing in policy that's helping them?
Many other nations in Southeast Asia and Europe and the U.S. and elsewhere, and South America, understand that the intangible economy is not a production economy of cooperative trade. It's a rentier economy where somebody is the landlord and somebody is in the tenant. So nobody's going to look after Canada. Nobody's going to be our economic partner because nobody's anybody's economic partner in this system. It has to be us that looks after ourselves. And I've not seen a country with more potential do less attention to this than Canada. So just look, name. And the South Koreans are doing this sovereign compute. All the Europeans are doing it. They're doing the AI governance. South Americans are doing their own payment rails and systems. There's a big contention on the compute and digital sovereignty that the Mexicans are doing. U.S., of course. I'm really concerned as a country the lack of attention to this. It's moving fast, and we're putting negative points on the board, not even a positive point.
So what would be one of the first steps you would take to put us in the right direction?
Well, the first thing we have to do is orient to the fact that this stuff matters. We don't participate in any of these standard bodies. There's a war going on in standard bodies, right? What's happened is basically CENELEC and IEEE are the European ones. They booted out ISO because it's too U.S.-centric. The U.S. doubled down on ISO and IEC, as I talked in those structures when they exited the 66 global organizations, and then ISO and IEC are joined in AI governance. And we're not there. And we don't understand that the rules and the structures and the winners or losers are happening every single day on these committees right now. What would I do? I'd build capacity, I'd demand orientation, and I'd map out implementation plans on all these specific things that I've outlined. And I'm just giving examples from the last year. I could double this list if you want me to, but I only have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Madame Dancho. Mr. Ma, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses. My first question, Ms. Lambert, you mentioned that the AI and quantum are on converging timelines and that Canada has the room to lead. Even though you wish AI and quantum to be treated separately, how would you recommend that the government incorporate quantum into our AI strategy?
Thank you for the question. I think it's really important to understand the nuance between the two, and a lot of times emerging tech is treated as a broad bucket, and they are different platforms with different considerations, and also at a different stage of development right now. Where AI is further along, quantum is a bit more nascent within this. Here in Canada, we have a number of world-leading quantum computing hardware players that are competing at the highest levels with diligence. We have 3 of the 11 companies that are in Stage B of DARPA's Quantum Benchmarking Initiative, or QBI, are Canadian companies, which is a great testament to our strength in this. It was also Canada, through 1Qubit, that founded the global quantum software industry. So we have a number of significant assets here that it's really a key point right now for Canada if we look at some policy considerations that we may have overlooked with AI, and Mr. Bosley pointed out a number of those. I would argue that quantum is the canary in the coal mine for a number of the decisions that we make going forward and seeing what the path will be for commercializing this technology. Canada has a history, and it's been commented already, and I've said it before this committee as well, that we do very well in the early innings, and we're great pioneers of these emerging technologies. And then when it comes to commercialization, we give the value capture away. And so for quantum, we're at this decision point right now. And I think looking at this very, very seriously is a bit of a different path than for AI. And then we look with quantum, we want to skate to where the puck, or sorry, with AI and compute infrastructure, we want to be skating to where the puck is going with this. And rather than looking at one class of compute in isolation, these really are going to be orchestrated systems going forward. That's how we work with compute today. We use GPUs and CPUs. This all happens seamlessly behind the scenes. It will be similar with frontier compute and the different systems that we're talking about. We need to make a concerted effort to be working on developing these systems, ensuring we've got companies at the forefront of this space as well, and also understanding that orchestration, because we can't be sovereign over what we don't understand.
Thank you. Ms. Lambert, you co-wrote an article last November entitled Cyber Resilience, the Cornerstone of Canada's Digital AI and Quantum Future. In the article, you stressed the importance of treating the intersection of AI and quantum computer as central to Canada's digital future and ensuring the cybersecurity remains at the forefront of the discussion. Can you share with us what you see as the largest vulnerability Canada faces if cybersecurity does not keep pace with the development in AI and quantum computing?
Our entire economy is built primarily on a digital backbone. And what we're talking about is vulnerability to the foundational cryptographic systems that keep that backbone secure. So if we're not looking at updating those systems, and a lot of the cryptographic layer that's protecting our systems right now goes back to the 1970s, it's due for a refresh, to say the least. But with the opportunity right now with the quantum threat, which we've known about since 1994, and there's actually been a number of Canadians advocating for the need to prepare for this and leading the development of solutions that are now standardized in this space and ready for deployment, we have truly a generational opportunity to be not just migrating over to quantum safe solutions, but to be fundamentally refreshing our cryptographic layer and ensuring we have that protection over that digital backbone that is going to underpin our entire economy, national security systems, government systems, pretty much everything that we transact over now. So the potential risk for this is, quite frankly, catastrophic. It's something we're knowing about. We need to take action and move forward with urgency and ensuring it's not just the government that's protected, but all of society.
Thank you. So then what concrete steps should the government of Canada take to ensure our cybersecurity keeps pace with these emerging technologies?
Engaging with the developers of this, both of the technologies and also of the countermeasures, is really key. It's moving very, very quickly right now, and you can only be at that forefront by having that engagement as the first piece. I did mention the Cyber Centre released their post-quantum migration roadmap back in June 2025, which is a good first step with that. I think the government should look at department plans are due by end of day today. Are those department plans filed? Are they credible? Do we have an inventory of our assets? It's very hard to protect your cyber assets if you don't actually know what they are and where they are. And so getting that inventory layer in place is a key piece for that. And I think a government has a role to play and a responsibility. Government knows about this threat, and to be able to convey that to Canadians, to Canadian businesses, to Canadian public institutions, and ensure they've got the support and the coordination needed to migrate over is a key piece as well.
Thank you. Ms. Lambert, you also wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail entitled "The Future is Quantum, Canada Must Seize It," in which you stated the quantum technologies are the future. In particular, number 3, you said, since quantum computing is the future, how can Canada position itself to be the leader at the intersection of AI and quantum? You also talked about how Canada led groundbreaking AI research, but too often we've stopped short of translating scientific leadership into lasting economic and strategic advantages. So in your view, how did Canada fall short in fully commercializing and scaling its AI advantage?
Just quite concisely, please, Ms. Lambert, as we're over time.
I think we lost sight that we were in a race, and we continued to treat AI as a research project and not as a foundational technology platform that was moving forward and moving into commercialization industry, and our policy tools were completely mismatched for that.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 6 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Salut.
Mr. Saint-Marie, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and welcome to our three witnesses. Thank you for being here. A comment from Ms. Lambert. Once again, I'd like to repeat, it's such an important industry, the quantum industry, so I hope the best for you. And I think in the future, the committee could examine that industry in greater detail. And I have some questions for you, but Mr. Ma, my colleague, already asked those questions, so that's duly noted. I want to thank you. And by the way, the Turing Award won by Gilles Brassard of Montreal University had to do with this cryptography work, so we are keeping a close watch on that. So my questions will be for Mr. McAfee and then Mr. Balsillie. The first question, gentlemen. The law by the European Union adopted in 2024 on artificial intelligence. Well, should Canada be inspired by it? Is it a framework that could provide a good basis, or are we off track with that? So first of all, with Mr. McAfee and then Mr. Balsillie, please.
Merci, thank you. Certainly, one of the key concerns of the EU AI Act is actually its implementation. It was first moving in the launch of a high-risk system, which was quite distinct from the ADA Act. I think was something that we wanted to see better implemented in Canada as a way of assessing and trying to be able to understand where the applications of AI could be. And certainly as an educator, the fact that AI in education was a high-risk application is a good example of how this act was developing a literacy to try to process and triage human rights risks for new AI technologies. I think the concern has been the move towards generative AI models, which I think elude regulation strategically because they're meant to be all things at once. And so I think that is one of the things that we need to be mindful of, both the ways the EU AI Act has stalled around generative and foundational models and the ways that the assessment and the techniques of assessment were largely delegated to third parties, meaning that there wasn't actually institutional capacity at the government or the state level to make these kind of classifications. I think those were two key gaps we could learn from. And I think the third to emphasize in Europe is the development, proliferation of open models and the opportunity we have in collaboration with other developed nations to work towards more digital solidarities and stacks that allow us to take advantage of these complex technologies that one nation alone might not be able to create.
Monsieur Balsillie.
Yes, thank you for the.
Thank you, Mr. Balsillie.
And I think the Europe's ahead of us in many respects, not the least of which I've mentioned is their privacy legislation that's rooted in human rights, and also they're deeply involved in the regulations to govern AI. Professor McGalvey is right that learning models through everybody's sideways. My view of it is, and also there's enormous intellectual property issues that everybody's racing to on these things. But Europe has a lot more latitude to govern themselves because we got shackled under USMCA. And if you notice, the way we're trying to get ourselves out of this is through a little bit more sovereign compute. And the moment we talk about it, it's introduced as a trade irritant. So my point of it is that there's no silver bullet in this. We're going to have to understand the economic statecraft that's at play here. It's all very legal. It's very technical. Europe is a full participant, including their privacy legislation and including institutions to respond to that. And we're literally doing nothing. And so I just want to get us oriented to this and start to do these things. Definitely the standard setting on the AI Act, the privacy of GDPR, and certainly starting to look at the governance of it and what they're doing on sovereign compute. Very good places to start.
Merci beaucoup. Deuxième question pour vous deux.
Thank you. The second question for both of you. We talked about generative AI, and before the last election, in the margin of the C27, the government published a voluntary code of conduct for responsible development of generative AI, advanced AI. More than 40 companies signed onto that voluntary code. Is it enough for proper governance of AI? And in less than 1 minute each, perhaps once again, starting with Mr. McKelvey.
Briefly, no. And I think one part, just to echo Mr. Balsili's comments, is when I was co-director of the Applied AI Institute at Concordia University, we tried to participate in standards organizations and we lacked resources and capacity. So I just want to say that there's a gap for researchers with an expertise in understanding the social impacts of digital standards to participate at these levels. And I think the formation of the Code of Conduct is another example of a largely industry-led initiative trying to whitewash the social risks of AI with a non-binding agreement that's more of a photo op than anything about actual lived impacts, as we've seen play out most recently in Canada.
Monsieur Balsili.
Thank you, Mr. Balsili.
Merci.
Excellent, thank you.
Justement, ben là, il reste 30 secondes. Donc...
Well, I have 30 seconds left. So for Mr. Balsili, C-27 in the previous legislature, could that form a good basis for an act to govern AI in 30 seconds? Thank you.
C-27 was written for the benefit of Silicon Valley. And the idea that they wouldn't incorporate human rights into it and this spaghetti mixture of it. I mean, I participate with the national security drafts in Washington with the GOP, and I can follow and understand it very clearly. This is a spaghetti mix of diversion, and I'm quite sophisticated in these matters. It took me 3 months with 6 experts to pull apart C-27 and get my head around it, and my Center for Digital Rights, we wrote a 107-page critique of how you have to fix it. But look, if you want to do this stuff, then let's stop the charade and let the erosion and the harms carry on. Lose the culture of Quebec, hurt our children, weaken our economy, be vulnerable to security and predation, and let's stop the performance. But we all love this country, and we're all trying to make it better. And as Professor McKelvey said, we have to go to substance and not performative stuff, because the world sneaks through the cracks of the performance.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Saint.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Mr. Balsili, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you again in another committee. We can ask some important questions. Your expertise is always welcome. You had mentioned that Canada has huge potential in the technological era, that our economy could really be stimulated through it. I agree completely. Innovation hubs like Canada's Innovation Capital, Kitchener Centre is a huge contributor to that, as well as we have these amazing minds that are coming out of our universities that are turning into entrepreneurs and building our innovation. Where is the government missing the mark here?
There's 2 things. Number one, the government's thinking is rooted in the 1970s. There's no capacity for the contemporary realities. They don't understand how to govern this, that it works very different. So the research funding, the FDI programs, all of these things are not attuned to the contemporary realities. And since you talk about the hub here, we have to accept that over the past 10 years, startups out of places like Waterloo, Canadian founders, we used to be about 70% of them stayed in Canada. Now just over 30% of them stay in Canada. Now, any of you in business, we're losing 70% of your customers every year, your new customer every year. That's a crisis. So we have to start to relate to these people and talk to them and find out what's going on, why they're leaving, what are the problems. Again, we can't do performative and stuff because the people just leave. And I spend a big part of my time in philanthropy trying to encourage people to stay in Canada and build in Canada. And it's made far too hard to make that case when, quite frankly, they're putting wind in their face.
I agree completely. I'm going to circle back to that. I just wanted to ask a question because you did focus quite a bit on trade in your beginning statement. And so as we head into this CUSMA review, do you personally see the U.S.'s broader strategy to shape the terms of this negotiation to maintain advantage over our tech and data sectors?
Oh, 100%. We're not prepared at all. Not at all. Not in the slightest. It's pure performativeness. I've been involved in this. The U.S. has it's now 1,000 experts on 26 committees by law of Congress. And they've been preparing. So when we got into USMCA, imagine 26 committees. There's 1 million words in USMCA. You will not find the words free trade in it. Each one gets 40,000 words for their sector to say, this is what I want, that they've spent 6-7 years preparing. And we show up with an ad hoc group saying, yikes. Then we run the clock, and then they say, either sign it or we're pulling the plug. Remember how that all happened? And I wrote a piece saying, this is going to be bad. And they've weaponized ambiguity because they can restart in 6.5 years. Our economy has diverged since then. They put us over a barrel. We weren't prepared. And there is no preparation right now. I know the people that are in it. What is our response when they put their next 1 million words into it? And so, but again, we had a 1970s conception that it's hands off, get out of the way, let it flow. It's all shared when in fact it's win-loss. Landlord-tenant, and we had no strategies to be the landlord, so we became progressively the tenant. And yet we have so much potential and so many blessings, but now we're vulnerable to leverage in every aspect of our sovereign democratic nation.
So have you personally been in conversations with the government sounding the alarm here to say, get prepared because this is
many
what we're
times.
seeing?
Many times.
Have you been listened to at all in any way?
It's not that they're adversarial, it's they don't understand.
Period.
Period.
Okay.
I'm trying to tell you, they're locked in a bygone era. That's why I use the metaphor of the stroke. If you've ever read books on these, you could try to persuade someone they have a right arm and they don't believe you. No, I have no right arm. It's not there. It's not there. And I could go chapter and verse. It's like we say we have the most free trade agreements in the world. If they're instruments for regulatory remote control, then we're the most shackled in the world. Mm-hmm. So they're instruments of shackling, not of enabling. If you don't approach them with expertise, which we did not. We approached them with a 1970s production liberalization model, and then they gaslight saying, we're the envy of the world. And when I engage with these people, Europe fights tooth and nail and refuses to concede to the very things Canada all conceded to because they know it's the end of the game.
Thank you very, very much. I have one question for Professor Lambert. You had mentioned that we focus a lot on research, but we missed the mark with commercialization, the government's current strategy. So I just wanted to talk specifically of the Minister of Digital Innovation just came out with a new program to build the world's most advanced AI supercomputer. But when I went into the application screening, only non-for-profits and post-secondary institutions can apply for it. Do you think by not including industry, we're again missing the mark here?
Yes, because I think we look at it again as a research project and not looking at the long-term investment with this and looking at how do we actually make this a tool that business can be leveraging. And for AI and quantum will be the same. These are platform technologies that you can build new business models on top of. And having a platform, having tools available that businesses can actively leverage, and for them to be a part of that. We can say for the quantum sector, industry is incredibly just how far ahead industry is mind-blowing, because things can be happening right now in industry that can't be happening in research, whether it's around the scale that they're moving up, but they're also very concerned about their IP and wanting to keep things settled down in how they're working, because they are in a global race for this. So if you want to be at the forefront with this, you do have to have industry at the table. And I would say the pace that industry can move at is far quicker than research or a lot of nonprofits in these cases. So it can add in other layers instead of having the key players with that. But again, you need to have a conversation or need to have an understanding of which industry is at the table and looking at the long-term benefits for Canada.
Thank you so much. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bardizzi, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. And colleagues, we are running over time, and as a reminder, we have committee business to tend to, so I'm going to have to take a minute off of your time, Monsieur Saint-Marie, and 2.5 minutes off Mr. Falks and 2.5 minutes off Mr. Baines. Go ahead, Mr. Bardizzi.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. And I'm trying to get a question to each of the witnesses, so I'll start with Mr. Balsillie. You've mentioned the sovereign AI strategies that different entities have, and one of the pillars of our forthcoming strategy will be, for Canada, will be building a sovereign Canadian sovereign AI foundation. You get the opportunity to see lots of innovators participating in the sovereign AI stack, or in the compute stack, to be precise. What are the specific, and you mentioned the talent and the things that, the opportunities that exist within the talent that's in Canada. Could you just say a bit more about which parts of the stack you think Canada can be especially competitive in?
I feel gaslighted with the over-rotation on one LLM, and that's no criticism of a company that's trying to make its way. I think by far, and I've been on this for a long period of time, the critical part is the data. That you cannot separate data, compute, and the software stack. And it's going to have to be a public utility, because if you put your healthcare data, are you going to give that to a corporation and do what they want? And so the most important thing is to think institutionally, to actually put the data to work as a critical input of this, and then whatever's in the stack for AI and compute, just make sure you've got a couple competitors. It's just a vendor relationship thing.
But I guess maybe to be precise then, are there players in the AI health data space that are ready for prime time in the way that you describe?
Well, it's kind of like saying, do we have good athletes, and you don't have a playing field for them to play on. If you haven't availed the health data into an environment that's properly governed to do it, we foreclose the potential, and that's part of the reason we've eroded, is we haven't created an environment. The U.S. uses their hyperscalers, and other countries in Europe and Asia use state structures and so on. We're just not in the game, or we give it away to foreign multinationals, and then we don't get the benefits. So I think there's good companies out there. I think they would love to work with iData. I think we should do the exact same thing for defense, which we're not doing right now. We just foreclose the game and take ourselves out of the high value-added security-enhancing stuff.
But you think specifically in healthcare and also in defense, there are good companies and good talent ready?
There's tremendous opportunity out there, but they need an environment to perform.
I want to switch over to Ms. Lalonde, and I'd like to get a bit of a perspective on the labor side. You are in the position of connecting with the players in the sector. You've helped inform the quantum strategy of the government, and I'd like to understand from a workforce perspective, when people are considering entering a field that has perhaps a bit more maturity, like AI, but they're also encountering an option in quantum computing. What do potential workers look at when you're trying to, in a sense, sell them on the opportunities in quantum computing, which is a space which isn't quite as mature as AI?
I think there's maybe misunderstanding still that you need a PhD to be working in quantum, which is very much not the case right now. We run Canada's Quantum Job Board, so we have direct insights into the positions that are being posted with that. Companies are recruiting across all areas of business. It is nascent, there is very much a vibrant industry, and they need to be looking at a handful of PhDs, and they're certainly always recruiting top talent in that area, engineers as well, those with master's degrees. But there's tons of opportunities for people with go-to-market skills, with operational skills, HR, finance, the whole gamut that comes with it. And increasingly, we're also seeing opportunities for tradespeople. There's a number of firms that I work with that actually hire directly out of polytechnics and trade schools to bring in that talent, and they're building systems. They need welders, they need those who are great with advanced fabrication and electronics and other pieces that way. So there's a whole breadth of opportunities, and it's a sector that's growing incredibly quickly right now. A study quoted in the National Quantum Strategy projects that for Canada's quantum sector by 2045, it'll create over 200,000 jobs. This is looking at direct, indirect, and induced impact from that. So it's a vibrant place. We're seeing this in Canada and also globally right now. So if people are looking to build something really vibrant, quantum is a great sector, and you don't need a PhD necessarily to be part of it.
Thank you. Mr. McKelvey, on the previous panel, we heard from some labor unions expressing some concern about the use of AI to displace or mask the potential presence of a customer service agent in Canada and create an appearance that that agent is in Canada when they're actually somewhere else, or that it's an AI agent rather than a human agent. Can you just speak briefly to what a policy framework to respond to that kind of activity might look like?
Yes, I think one of the things to highlight is, especially because many of the workers there were coming from telecommunications, just how much there is an attention to the ways that AI is being positioned around as automation in telecommunications sector. And that's something, if you read the annual reports of many of the big telco firms in Canada, that's been identified as a trend for a long time. So the fact that we're catching up to this is, I think, one of the reasons I have concerns about Canada's AI strategy so far. Certainly, I think that, you're talking about consumer protection and making sure that you have a robust competition bureau that's able to investigate forms of consumer malpractice and the ways that chatbots are representing companies, I think is really important. And I think this needs to be kind of proactive about consumer rights rather than ex ante, which we've seen in the past in the Air Canada case.
Thanks, Mr. Bardisi. OK, Monsieur Saint-Marie, brièvement, une minute.
Mr. Saint-Marie, briefly. Thank you, Chair. My question, once again, is for Mr. Balsillie and Mr. McKelvey. I won't have time to get a complete answer, so I'll ask Mr. Balsillie, and both of you, please feel free to complete the answer by sending an email to the committee clerk to include it in the committee's study. A number of previous witnesses, or a few of them, have suggested an international treaty governing artificial intelligence, and that it would be a good thing to start working with countries that have the same interests as we do in that regard. What do you think, Mr. Balsillie?
It's performative, that we're not participating at the plumbing level where it's actually happening right now, but we want to be in some kind of performative thing that appears that we're doing something when in fact where the real game is going on, we're AWOL. And I think our current approach is I would not call responsible.
Merci, puis Monsieur McKelvey, n'hésitez pas.
Thank you, and Mr. McKelvey. Could you please send your answer by email? Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our witnesses. Mr. Balsillie, I'd like to begin with you. I was present, I was substituting on the Industry Committee when you presented on Bill C-27, and you very clearly articulated what a disaster that piece of legislation was. And since then, we haven't seen this government come up with anything. It's like you say, they're missing in action. You've provided us with a lot of information. We've seen that our immigration has been double the percentage of what the Americans has been, and yet our GDP has been dropping by 0.5% a year. Well, we don't have to do the math too long to see where that's headed. And so we've completely dropped the immigration portfolio here, or the perspective as well, that the people that we're bringing in aren't adding value to the GDP. You provide us with a lot of information here, and there's lots of trails I'd like to go down, but what I will go down is in Figure 8, you talk about the data-driven economy has ushered in a trail of social harms. And then when I go to Figure 20, you also talk about the Americans bringing in legislation for an AI framework just this past March, which addresses things like parental control and protecting our children. Can you expand on that a little more, please?
Yeah, well, what's so important to understand is that data and privacy are the feedstock of this system. So whatever you're going to try and do, if you don't do privacy right, your ability to do anything is much, much more difficult. The second thing is that if you don't understand how to develop scope of action in these legal frameworks, your ability to do something is much less again. And so what's happened, it's become very profitable to hurt people. And it's become a state company apparatus to jackhammer that into vulnerable states that they can get away with it. And so here we are. And if we want to protect our children, if we want to protect our economy, if we want to protect our communities and culture, we're going to have to say we're strong on privacy. We're going to know our red lines in these negotiations, and we're going to be much shrewder in capacity, because we're principally rule takers, not rule makers, how we navigate these realms. And then, as a for instance, we've allowed to be privatized the media serving engine by a private social media network. That's a public good. We built CBC 100 some odd years ago because Canadian stories weren't being told, but now we let other people tell us what stories we should be hearing, and they tell them in a way to addict us and hurt us because that's more profitable. So my answer lies into you have to approach this. You got to get privacy right. You got to get your expert degrees of navigation, freedom, expertise right, and you have to create alternative approaches because these companies do respond to competitive threats. Facebook was privacy protecting. Then when they got dominant, they became privacy exploiting. You have to change the terrain ex ante, not very limited ex post tools that get into geostrategic state battles.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Falk. That's 60 seconds over. Yeah. Mr. Nantuba, il y a 2 minutes 30 secondes pour vous.
Président.
2.5 minutes. Mr. Nantuba. Thank you. Mr. Basley, I heard you, and I'd like to go back to two things that we heard previously. Two pillars of the government, giving Canadians the means to act, foster the adoption of AI for shared prosperity. Our government is now investing in two programs for expanding our computing capacity in Canada, calculation challenges, and sovereign infrastructure, both assessed at a minimum $750 million. How can the capacity for calculation and access to data, how can this influence Canadian enterprise in AI?
Question. As I said before, I mean, there was money before in compute and it was reprofiled, the $800 million. And then the first check for sovereign compute was given to a foreign firm. I think you're going to have to look, the mistake that's happening, and there's being a lot of gaslighting going on where foreign firms are calling themselves Canadian firms. The compute and all these reports are going out there and they're not dealing with the governance layer. If you don't, who has right to chew on your health data and decide who gets to see it under what terms? I don't want that to be a private actor. And so you have to not only look at the compute function and who does it, and you had an excellent comment from on the quantum stuff that says you need private firms to be doing this quicker, but I do not want the governance layer privatized. I have not seen anything on the governance of this and the governance of the data and the governance of the compute when you put sensitive Canadian data into these systems. And yet we can't afford not to do it. And this is the part of the institution of sovereign compute, and I can provide much more detail to that to you, how you might want to think about it. And there's an expert group that's been working on this, but quite frankly, has been rejected by the government, and I'm not involved in it. It's unfortunate.
Madame Lambert, je vous reposerai
Ms. Lambert, I would like to ask you the same question as I asked Mr. Bassili earlier. Can you comment on that, please?
Juste un accord avec Monsieur Balcelis.
I agree with Ms. Bassili regarding the governance. It's important for the industry to be at the table. And I agree that the industry has not remained in charge of governance, and it ought to remain in the hands of a public institution with an entity that can serve Canadians.
Okay, colleagues, that brings...
Thank you, Mr. Natuba.
Here. Thank you very much to witnesses for making themselves available. Colleagues, I'm going to suspend. We are going into committee business, which means I'm going to need all non-designated staff to leave the room once I hit the gavel here. It's going to take us about 2 minutes to transition over. And I know that folks like to have conversations after the fact to debrief on the meeting, but if you choose to do that and your presence is required at the table, just note that you'll have a conflict in your schedule. Suspended. We're going to start again in 2 minutes.